Well, thanks again for coming on the show, Jeffrey.
Glad to be here. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Thanks for sharing that piece with us and the video too. It's kind of great to be able
Great.
to see some of the stuff you're working on currently.
Mm-hmm.
What I was thinking of is, when did you kind of really discover that music was your passion?
I remember I must have been about 7, 8 years old, always listening to my little transistor radio in bed before I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how I hear those songs now and they bring you back. Of course, music brings us back. But
Sure.
I loved it then. Prior to that, I studied accordion. I, of course, got into piano.
Okay.
And then choir at the church, and that eventually led into drums at the church. And then I started realizing this is pretty cool. And one thing led to another, and there it is.
Nice.
Found my love very early.
Wow. And then it just kind of nurtured and cultivated over time.
Yeah, and evolved. And at that time, of course, I never knew that I would make a career out of being a musician.
Right.
It was just a love. And I had this, of course, dream that, hey, you know, this is great. I'd love to be a musician. If I could just even work at a music store, I would be happy.
Still be connected to the music
Yes.
somehow.
Yes.
Right.
And that, of course, has evolved into a huge career beyond that.
Right.
So I took my drums through school, high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a very popular rock band at the time, sort of a surf band. And after that, the piano was still there. So I got back to the piano, met a really influential teacher, Robert Stevens, who saw something in me and really motivated me.
Would this have been like in the high school or
Just
post-high school?
Just after high school.
Okay.
And motivated me to fall in love with classical music.
Ah.
And then that encouraged me to get back into school, where I went to Long Beach State and got my Bachelor's of Music and Performance, and then my Master's in Composition.
Awesome.
So that's sort of hand in hand started my career, so to speak.
And so you ended up taking that love and then kind of balancing it with all the musical theory part and learning
Yes.
all of those things, and that kind of allowed you to go to the next level. I remember you were telling me earlier about you being able to conduct in China and bring some of your original pieces there. And tell us about some of those experiences in China and even here in the United States, some of your professional experiences with playing and producing music that way.
Yeah, well, it all started with the piano, of course, and then in school you learn how to orchestrate and arrange, and I love all instruments. So I started writing for small ensembles and became bigger ensembles and orchestras, and that really blew up. So from there, I was invited to arrange orchestral music for a tour in China and play piano, which I did. And then based on that, I was asked to come back and conduct.
Wow.
And there I conducted in Beijing the National Symphony Orchestra of China.
That seems like that'd be quite an invitation and quite an honor to
Big honor.
to do that. Yes.
Very intimidating. They don't speak English. But
Oh wow! You know, I hadn't even really thought about that. You know, and you hear kind of the cliche about music being the universal language, but there is something about having to communicate with your musicians about we're going to do this and that and the other, and that language barrier.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Music is a universal language. I mean, we use a lot of the same terms regardless of where we are in the world.
Oh.
So that helps. But then again, in rehearsals, it gets to be a bit challenging
Sure.
because you want to convey something, and
Right.
you need an interpreter, you need to throw something.
Just to get their attention.
Yes,
Sure.
Yeah. But the orchestra there was fantastic. 110-piece orchestra, very disciplined, incredible musicians.
That's
It was a great honor.
That's awesome.
A lot of fun.
And in your own experience, I think you've been part of a jazz trio, and you've recorded some of your own music that
Yes.
way. Are you still involved with music in that performer aspect?
Yes, I still play quite a bit. I have a trio with an album we completed about 3 years ago, and we still play out quite a bit. Not as much as I used to. My time now is much more involved in composing. I do a lot of film music, video game music, and producing, where I'm producing singers and just music in general.
So, and let's talk about that, because it seems like, you know, if we were to kind of track your career, that you had gone, and it's not necessarily like these clean cuts, but just how you can see how it kind of changes and transitions over time, where now you're more in like the entertainment business end of music. You're still very much involved in music. It's just not necessarily in a conducting aspect. It's more in providing like sound design and composing for games and movies and all those kinds of things. What are some of the projects that you're working on or have worked on recently?
Right now I'm working on Ghostbusters, which is the video game based on the original movie.
Massive
and that
80s
is
movie.
just, it's going to be big. It's a lot of fun. I've worked on so many movies where I produced the music in my own studio with just synthesizers and samplers, as well as with orchestras, and then everything in between. Depending on the budget of a film, we only have enough to pay you, so that's me by myself.
That's
doing
you doing
everything.
all the instruments. Yeah, right.
Or on the other hand, we can afford an orchestra, so here's a budget. Then I'd go write the music, transcribe the music, and conduct and record that. So that's the musical side. On the sound design side, that involves, cutting in big giant effects, for example, an explosion, flying bats, whatever the scene calls for, we create those sounds from scratch. And to me, even in music is sound. Sound is music. They're interchangeable. What's the difference between a violin and hitting a garage can or a trash can?
Yeah.
They're just sounds. So sound design is that, taking all sorts of sounds and just creating a world of color through sound.
That's great. Before we go, we have one more clip to look at. This is from a video game that is currently out. It's called Rise of the Argonauts. So let's take a look.
Either with the gods or against them, I will have my vengeance.
Impressive, to say the least. For many of our viewers that are young, they're school-age students, what kind of advice would you give them as far as wanting to get started in music and what to do with it and what are some of the possibilities? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, number one, practice.
Ah, yes.
I spent many a year, many a day, and my mother can attest to it, 8 hours a day on my piano. That's where it all started.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of it, being disciplined, and the discipline came out of the love of the music.
Yeah.
I was always loving what I was doing, so it wasn't really a chore for me.
No.
So I stuck with it. That's what I would say, is just stick with it, because if you love it, things can happen.
Yeah.
There are doors that will open. The music industry is so large, and we have so much room for performers, for composers, for arrangers. There's so many slots out there. So if you stick with it, you will become a good musician and possibly a professional musician. So, and follow what you love. That's kind of my motto.
Yeah, I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, if you do what you love, everything else will follow.
Will fall into place.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey Allen Jones, for coming on the show. We really appreciate
All right.
it. And we'll be right back in just a minute. Stick around.